Hello! Hi everybody, thanks for joining this live tutorial of Lightroom. I am Giselle Behrens and this is Photo TV NYC. This is a follow-along tutorial, so you can download the photo down in the description where the link is. Just click on it and it's going to give you the original photo I took of this amazing scene, which is in Spain. And over here you can take a sneak peek of how it's going to look. So this is the original that you're going to download, and we're going to be editing it to look like this. Okay? If you prefer, you can also choose one of your own photos and follow along with your own photo. Remember to subscribe when you can so you never miss a live show, as well as hit that like button now so we don't forget to just like that video. We're also going to be crowdsourcing some photos for some lives that we will be doing. So if you have a photo that you'd like me to edit on Lightroom, submit it to myphototvnyc@gmail.com. The email is right below, right here. And I'll keep an eye out for the photos that come in. As of now, we have a couple of them already lined up. Okay, everybody, so let's start. So this is the original photo, and it's taken in RAW format. So RAW format gives you as much information as you can and as you're able to have in the photo. The beauty of the RAW format, as I always say, is that you're going to really be able to use all of the information in the shadows as well as all of the information on the highlights. What happens with JPEG is that sometimes you're going to just lose all the information in the highlights, and when you try to lighten up or darken down the highlights or the shadows, there won't be any information. So whenever you can, use RAW. The file that I provided you guys is a .cr2, which means that I took this photo with a Canon in RAW format. So every brand has a different type of format. For example, the Sony is .arw, but they are both RAW photos. So what we're going to do, we really want to edit this photo in a way that we keep all of this amazing colors and saturation and sun setting over here, while we expose and we brighten up all of this dark area. So when you take a photo to a sunset, this is what's usually going to happen. Whatever you have on your foreground, and your foreground is this area over here, is usually going to go darker because your camera is going to be exposing for the sky. This is why we have a beautiful sky, but a dark foreground. So it can also happen the other way around, that you have a very nice foreground, but your sky is going to be completely blown out and it's going to be white. So if you did take your photo in RAW, there is good news because you might be able to save that sunset photo and it'll be a perfect one to follow along with this tutorial. If you don't have it right now to go live, you can look for it after and follow the tutorial afterwards on YouTube because it is going to stay there, this video. So as I was mentioning, we're going to treat this photo as two different photos. The first photo is here on the top, and the second photo is right here on the bottom. Okay? And to do this, our first tip is that we're going to use masks. Okay? So if you type the M, and here's the M, that's the hotkey for the masks. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here in Lightroom. I'm going to type M, and you can see in my develop module, let me just turn that cursor on my develop module, you're going to come up with the mask section. And you're going to have a little cursor which is a cross. So you can drag your mouse all the way on the second part of the photo, and you're going to see how the photo is going to start lighting up at the bottom, only at the bottom, while leaving the sky with that beautiful color and beautiful exposure which it already has. So this is a preliminary adjustment. I'm going to press M again, right over here, this M, and it's going to close up the masks. Now that we have balanced out the composition and we can see how much information we have, we can go over to our general adjustments. So what I call general adjustments is, in the develop module, you can press D as your hotkey to go to the develop module. And the first tab over here is going to be your basic adjustments. So we're actually going to do first some basic adjustments so we can be happy and content where our photo is, and we're going to try to balance out the photo as much as we can to have all the information available. And what I mean by have all the information available is that we actually have, for example, if we go over here to our shadows, we want to see leaves on the shadows. We don't want to see a block of black color, because that means that there's no information. So if you do see in your photo a block of black color in your photo, that means that there's no information there. If you want to see if you do have information, you can augment your exposure and you can start seeing over here how these leaves start opening up when you augment your exposure. And that's the beauty of RAW. That's what I mean, that when you have RAW, you're still going to have as much as possible information in your shadows and in your highlights. So I'm going to press Z as in zoom to zoom out. Now, after the exposure, we're going to adjust slightly the contrast. And I always like to push the slider all the way to the right, just to see what happens to the photo. And you're going to start seeing that when you do push this slider all the way to the right, the photo starts looking a little bit strange. You start losing a lot of information here in the sky, and all the shadows start becoming very blocky and very dark. And we want to avoid that unless that is your intention as a photographer, to have a very contrasty look, and that's totally fine. But for this photo, we're actually going to select a balanced look while we have good exposures on our sky and good exposures on our buildings, which are our foregrounds. So that being said, I'm going to reset it. You can double click the word contrast and it's going to reset it back to 0. And now you can slide the contrast. I think around 34 is good for me. You still can see how you start losing detail on the highlights. So we're definitely going to take a look at what's going on there afterwards. And by using masks, which is our first tip of the video, we will be able to recover some of the information and the color. Because if you can appreciate, if you press backslash, this is our backslash keyword, hotkey. If you press backslash while you're at Lightroom, you are going to be able to see the original photo. Let's give it a second while Lightroom is thinking about the original photo. There's the original photo. And these are the adjustments that we have so far. Now what I usually like to do, I go on the same basic tab. I'm going to go to Presence. And in Presence, we're going to have Texture, Clarity, Dehaze, Vibrance, and Saturation. For now, I really just want to focus on Texture, Clarity, and Dehaze. And I usually work my way from bottom to top, starting by Dehaze. So dehaze is really going to give you those rich blacks that you're looking for, but it's very sensitive. So if you push your slider all the way to the right, you're going to see how the blacks start becoming very, very black and blocky, and the saturation gets extremely pumped up, and it gives you a contrast which obviously looks over manipulated, and it's a cool look if that's what you're going for. But again, in this photo, what we're going for is real with a punch of dramatic, just to give that sunset the look and the feeling that it had when you were actually there watching it in those last minutes of the sun going down. So I'm going to reset my dehaze. You can also take a look at what happens, an experiment, what happens if you push your slider of dehaze all the way to the left. And now you're going to completely have a white sky and sort of a foggy feeling to it. So maybe if you have some sort of image with a forest or with trees or with buildings, this might be a cool filter that you can try to use for this foggy and misty look. But for now, I'm going to reset dehaze, and I'm going to go to around, let's check it out. I just feel it, I feel out the photo while I'm looking at it, because I'm such a visual person, and I imagine you guys are as well, up to around 31. Now that we did dehaze, which is the most sensitive of the sliders, we're going to go to clarity. And clarity is going to give you that punch and that contrast in between the midtones. So it's really not going to touch as much on the shadows and the highlights. It's mainly going to give you that punch on the midtones. It's really beautiful because it helps with the contrast as well as with the sharpness. So I also like to go to 100% while I'm doing my clarity, because it's easier to see what's the effect that the slider is having. So I'm going to reset it, and if I augment, you can very subtly see the effect of the clarity. I'm going to reset that. Don't blink. If you blink, you're going to miss it. There. I resetted it, and back to to 45. 0, 32. So you can see that it gives you that very nice look, especially when you're treating with urban photography, with urban landscapes, buildings, textures, nature, trees, these type of elements where you have a texture or a pattern that you want to enhance, windows. This is a very, very good tool that Lightroom gives us to have a cleaner and sharper image. And now texture is the most subtle of all of the three between dehaze, clarity, and texture, and it's going to give us a sharpness that's going to enhance all of the shapes, the lines, and any type of particle or element that you have in your photo. So if we reset texture, you're going to see that it becomes a little bit softer, the image. If you want it sharper, let's just push the texture all the way to the right and see what happens. You can start seeing how this noise really, really starts to come out. So right now I zoomed in at 3:1, so this is more than 100% my zoom. And this tutorial, by the way, is for people that are already familiar with basic knowledge of Lightroom. If you don't know Lightroom and you do want to learn from scratch, I will have some courses coming up live so you guys can do some online questions. And I'll share with you guys the schedule soon. We have a comment from Jean-Paul, and it says, raw pictures and Illustrator are like raw food ingredients and in a kitchen. That is true. Raw is going to give you all of the ingredients that you need to cook that amazing photo. I like that, Jean-Paul. Thanks for that comment. So if I right now reset texture by double clicking on the word texture, you're going to see how the grain is softer now. So I'm just going to go back. I like to see it at 1:1, which is at 100%, and I'm happy with my texture now. So I'm going to hit Z for zoom, just to zoom out, and take a look at the before and after. This is the before, and this is the after. If you want to quickly toggle between before and after, you can use your hotkey of backslash right there shown on the screen. So I do think that the blacks are a little bit too black, so I'm just going to go back on the dehaze. And guys, it's totally fine if you think that you did an adjustment exactly where you wanted it, and then you notice that it was too much or too little. It's totally fine to go back, and that's the fun of it. That's the fun of editing. It's really a feel it type of process, because you want to give your spectators a story in your photograph, and the storyteller is you. You're the photographer. You want to guide the viewer into seeing what it is that you saw, what it is that you felt as much as possible, while everybody has their own individual experience while seeing your photo. So this is it for now for the basic tab. I'm going to adjust colors afterwards. I'm still in my general settings. As I explained before, I want to make as best as possible this photo in general terms without doing too much of selective adjustments at the beginning. So right now I'm going to go to this tab, which is called Detail under Develop, still under Develop. I'm going to open that tab up, and I'm going to go to Noise Reduction. So noise reduction is going to help us eliminate this graininess that you can see in the photo. So right now I'm zoomed in at 4:1, and when you are adjusting the noise and reducing it, you usually want to go to 1:1, and this is how usually your photo is going to print when you do print it up. And if you enlarge it larger than 1:1, your grain is going to start to become larger. So you do want to make sure that the grain is where you wanted it to be. The grain is going to be determined by the ISO on the setting of your camera that you had when you took the photo. And the way to check this is with the hotkey I, and it's right there on your screen. So if you go to Lightroom and you hit I once, the information is going to appear on the upper left corner, okay? And if you hit it twice, once more again, more information is going to come up. And here is where your ISO is going to show. So for this photo, and if you downloaded the original file, it is ISO 500. So everybody's going to start with the same file if you did download that file. And if you're using your own photo, now you know that the I is the hotkey to see what type of information you have on your photo. So I'm just going to press it again, the I, because I don't want to work with a photo there. I want more workspace. So we're going to go 1:1 over here, or with your hotkey Z, and we're going to go to noise reduction, luminescence, and usually in general, as a general rule of thumb, I personally use the noise reduction between 20 to 30 if the ISO is set at around 400 or higher. And this usually gives me good results. I try not to go over 1600, but I use right now I'm using the Sony Alpha 7R3, and it has really good noise. And what that means is that the grains and the noise, the digital noise, is not as dramatic as in other cameras. So I do have flexibility with this camera to go up to 3200, and even if we're in very low circumstances, we can go to 64,000, and the grain starts becoming part of the magic of the photo. But for now, this one is 500, and I'm pretty happy with it at, I think I'm going to go around 26. Then I'm going to close this detail tab, and I'm going to go to the lens corrections, press Z again to zoom out. And in lens corrections, I'm going to enable profile correction. And this is going to give me a very subtle correction of of the vignetting that is on the sides, on each of the corners, and if there's any distortion on the photo. In this particular photo, it didn't do a lot of difference. And you can also remove your chromatic aberration. Let's take a look if there is in fact chromatic aberration in this photo. Usually when you have a backlit sky, there is some chromatic aberration that appears. So I just unchecked chromatic aberration to show you guys where we can see it. So if you see this area, there's a little bit of red or magenta in between the lines, and these are details. Really, if you want to make that photo go wow and have that wow effect, you want to really focus on the details of a photo and do subtle adjustments and make sure that everything looks as good and as clean as possible, so you can see and your image as a photographer is going to be the cleanest one. So if you do remove the chromatic aberration, you can see very, very subtly how over here it starts decreasing. Don't blink. And if you feel that you want to do it a little bit more, you can go to the fringe. I went from profile, which is automatic, to manual. So I just clicked here on manual, and you can go to defringe, and you can also adjust it manually. If you want to add more green, you can add a little bit more green. Now these are very subtle adjustments, as I mentioned, but when you do print it out and when you do distribute it to a client or to a friend, they won't notice like, oh, it doesn't have chromatic aberration. No, they won't know that it's there, but they will have the feeling that it's a very professional photograph, and that's what you want to do as a photographer. So now I'm going to close the lens correction, and now the fun begins. We're going to go to our mask, and as I mentioned before, M is our hotkey for the masks, okay? So here in Lightroom, you can go to M, and you're going to know that you're in the masks because of the cursor that is a little cross now. And we're going to be treating this photo as two parts. The top is the sky. I'm just repeating it many, many times so everybody remembers that we're going to be treating it as two different photos. If you're familiar with HDR, high dynamic range, is also a good way to get all of the information in a darker area of the photo and a lighter area of the photo. There will be a different course for that, but this particular photo is taken in RAW, and we're just going to do a mask and treat this as two separate photos. So right now we're going to treat the sky, and what I want to do is bring down the highlights a little bit and give a little bit more shape to the clouds so it becomes more of a dramatic sunset like the one that we were seeing there. Right now, when we adjusted the exposure at the beginning, the photo became it became really nice on the bottom part, but the sky became a little bit bland. So I'm going to go in masks over here. You're going to double click the word effect, and that's going to ensure that all of your sliders are set in 0. Okay? And now I'm going to do the mask on the top. So to do the mask on the top, you're going to drag from top to bottom like this. Okay? And now we're going to go down and see what type of information we do have in the sky. Of course, if we go all the way to the left, it's going to look like a horrible storm is coming to Madrid, and we don't want that, at least not for this photo. So I'm going to reset it by double-clicking the word exposure and manually just dragging slowly the slider to the left. And you can see how it becomes to start becoming alive. Even the colors are becoming to get more saturated only by making the exposure a little bit darker. You don't want to go too dark because then it's going to start looking very weird and over manipulated. There are many over manipulated photos out there, and if that's your look, go for it. For this one, we're going to go realistic with a touch of drama. Yep, that's a good description, probably of somebody that you know as well. So I think that this exposure is okay. I'm going to lower the highlights as well, and what the highlight is going to do is basically going to bring down this area because it's the lightest part of the photo. I'm going to go back to exposure and augment this a little bit, and I think I'm pretty happy with this right now. Let's take a look at the before and after. It's always good to toggle between before and after because it reminds us where we were and how all of the subtle adjustments that we have been doing accumulate to make this photo look much better and have that wow effect. I do feel that the buildings are a little bit too cool and too blue, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go back to my M, which you can see there on your screen, that makes us close the masks. So now I'm back to my basic tabs, and I'm going to open up basic, and I'm going to go to the white temperature and just drag the slider to see what happens if I go to the left. It just goes too cool, and it looks like the sun had already set because there is a blue time right after the sun sets and all of the light is blue, and that light is beautiful. But right now the sun was still up there, so I want to show everybody how the sun was up. So I'm going to go with a warmer white balance, and you can start to see in the buildings, in the walls of the buildings, how the reflection of the warm sun starts warming up the buildings. So if we see at the before and the after, it's a very subtle adjustment which is going to just give us that cozy and warm feeling of a sunset. You don't want to go too warm because or else your photo is just going to start looking weird again, unless you want to add that filter, which is totally fine. Right now we are doing it as realistic as we can with a touch of drama. Okay, I think that this looks good for me. Now when I take a look at it, I still do think that I can go on my exposure a little bit higher up. So I'm just going to augment my exposure, and I feel that this building over here is just too heavy visually. And by that I mean that it's just too dark, because what I'm doing right now is that I'm trying to guide my spectator's eye. The first area that the spectator is going to see is this quadrant over here. So if you divide your photo in 4, right now, probably you're taking a look at this, and this is the heaviest one, which is okay because you have this huge building on your bottom right. Then I want the spectator to take a look at the sunset, right? From here, go all the way here, and then back to this building. But what's happening is I feel that I'm taking a look at this building, which is great, then I'm taking a look at the sunset, and then blank, blank, blank. I'm taking a look at this, which is just too heavy visually for me. It's too dark. So we're going to go to our hotkey K. Right there on your screen you can see it, and that's going to open up the paintbrush. Okay, and with the paintbrush it works exactly the same as the masks, only that instead of giving you a full area, you're actually going to be painting in the areas that you want to do the adjustments. And this brings us to our second tip, which is selective adjustments. So we're always going to start out double tapping the effects word, and that's going to, remember, is going to zero down and reset all of our sliders, because you don't want to all of a sudden have pink over here and not notice it, and then when you print it out there's a very strange pink hue that you didn't notice on your monitor. That has happened and it's not fun. especially when you're in front of a client. So you do want to be as professional as possible. Reset this, and this way you're going to give everybody that impression that you know exactly what you're doing and that your photo looks as clean as possible. I'm going to zoom in, but I'm going to hit 1:1 over here because it was going at 8:1, and I'm going to drag with spacebar. If you tap spacebar, your little hand appears, and I'm just going to draw. I'm going to augment the brush size, and I'm going to add exposure to brighten this building up. And very subtly you can see how this building starts to become more in the same tone as the bottom part of the buildings. You can also zoom in at 1:2, so you can start having a little bit of a bigger view. You can also close this by hitting this arrow over here, and it just closes it, giving you more working space, which is always good. And now we can just zoom out and take a look at the before and after. So if I delete my adjustments that I just painted in, you can see how this building was as dark as it was. And now you can see how it lightened up. Oh, now that we did this, I'm going to press again my letter K on my keyboard, and this is going to close up the paintbrush. And I'm just going to press F now. Let me show you on your screen. You can see the F, and that hotkey is going to show you in full mode how your photo is looking. It might take a little bit depending on how many programs you have up and running and how big is your photo. This photo in particular was pretty big because it is a raw photo, and if you do see the original file that you downloaded, if you did do it, it's around 32 megas, so it's a pretty big photo. Okay, so if you toggle again your F, you're going to go back into Lightroom, but I always like to see the photo as big as possible. And another trick, another hotkey is Tab and Shift. And Tab and Shift are going to show you, they're going to hide all of the windows, leaving you just the photo. So you can toggle that just to take a larger look at your image, feel it out, see if it is where you want it to be. And for me, I think that it's exactly where I want it to be. So if you guys have any comments, we have here a happy face from Fernando. Jean-Paul's comment was awesome. Thank you, with the recipes and that little peace sign. And Titina Toro says, amazing, it really pops out. Let's see if Titina Toro is right. And let's take a look at the after, the before, and the after. And we can actually take a look at it over here as well, a little bit larger. Here you can see how the city really starts to become alive. You still have your beautiful sunsets. I didn't think that it needed more color on the sunset, but if you do want to pump up the color, you can go to your basic tab and just hit Vibrance. Vibrance is going to give you that additional pop of color that you need. You can see here the before and the after. I'm just toggling it on, toggling it off. I might just add maybe like 8 or something like this, very subtle, but I'm happy where it is. So thank you everybody for watching. Any comments, any questions that you guys have, you can do it down below. Also, remember to subscribe to this channel so you never miss a live. We're going to be doing twice daily lives, one at 12 p.m. and one at 3 p.m. And you can add the alert button. That way you're going to be notified when we do go live. And like that video, just hit it right now so you do remember to do it, and don't forget afterwards. Bye everybody, thanks for joining. I'll keep an eye out for all of those questions, and as I mentioned, we do have 2 photos of 2 photographers that will be featured next week. Bye, have a good one.